Well, folks, it's another episode of the Rec Room podcast. And my sole purpose of this show is to highlight those who come into my life as being those who I can seek wisdom from, counsel from, and learn stories from. And this lady here, Emily Ehman, is one who exactly and precisely fits that bill. It's been a few weeks since, almost a month actually, since Nebraska, Michigan State, where we first met. And Emily, I just wanted to take the time to tell you how much that meant to me.
Oh,
Because in this day and age, right, it feels like there's power distance, and it feels like as you're trying to figure out ways to get into this industry here, there are some roadblocks to it. And I know that you were remarkably willing to engage with me, to sit there with Chris and myself and just talk about the craft. And then the next week we had a Zoom, and now we're here. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. Thank you for being willing to do it. And I respect and appreciate your attitude around that.
well, of course, I am always down to help out people, whether it's people that just want to learn more about the industry or are already in it or trying to get into it. So I'm very happy we got to connect, and I love what you're doing down there.
Thank you. Thank you. And, like we said at the top of the show, it's about highlighting those who are interesting. And let's face it, you have become somebody who is, I call you, and if you don't like the term, I would understand. But from my outward perspective, the face of college volleyball in the women's game, I really do see that as true. And through understanding that and having watched your growth and development, because I think people forget that you're only a few years removed from being at Northwestern. Like
Yeah.
this thing has happened really quickly, and it's been beautiful to watch. But what I am so deeply desiring to know, Emily, is as you talk about the experiences that you've had in volleyball and in covering other sports, predominantly with the Big Ten Network,
Yep.
what are some of the moments, if you have them on deck, that stand out to you as a cut above the rest, as being more exciting, better environments? Like, what are those for you?
Well, I have been blessed to do a lot of really big matches over the last 2 years. And to be honest, I don't know if I can pick just one, but there's definitely a few that stand out. So the number one, like not even a question, hands down, was Volleyball Day at Nebraska last year. So it was August 30th, 2023. Nebraska packed 92,003 people into a football stadium to watch a college volleyball match, which was a worldwide attendance record for any women's sporting event in history. So, like, it was monumental not only for the sport of volleyball, but for women's sports as a whole to get, over 90,000 people packed into a stadium. And, also to watch a volleyball match that wasn't much of a match, it was going to be a blowout, but to have that kind of, you know, admiration and adoration for this Nebraska program and just the sport as a whole was so cool. And I remember, the match happened in August, and I think I was told in like April that I was calling it. So there was a lot of buildup of what it looked like, what was happening behind the scenes, and I got a really good look into what all went into building that up, into making it happen. It was something that Coach Cook, the head coach for Nebraska, had been floating around for like about a year or so before then. And, these coaches are constantly trying to push the boundaries of what's possible in the sport. And he just kind of like willed his way to make it happen. And I remember the first stepping out into the stadium for the first time. And I mean, I was just an emotional mess. Like I was sobbing. We're like 10 seconds or we're 30 seconds from going on air. And I hit my producer. They're like 30 seconds to air. I'm literally sobbing. I have mascara running down my face. And this is like before we're on camera to where I need to look like $1 million out there. And I am sitting there in my little BTN polo, sobbing, like just not having any of my stuff together. But it was so cool, like to be a part of that moment in history for our sport. Like that was just something that I
Hmm.
will absolutely never forget. And there's a few more. So the other one, aside from that, was also last year where it was Nebraska against Wisconsin. It was later
Hmm.
on. It was in October, and it was a number one versus number two. Both teams were undefeated. They were like 18-0 at the time. And that was built up as literally the college volleyball match of the century. That had never happened, a one versus two undefeated matchup.
Wow.
And it was the buildup was so insane, but the match lived up to it, which oftentimes never happens. Like, there's been so many matches even this year where I think I've called like three or probably like five or six top five, top 10 matchups. And like, although so many of them have been sweeps.
Sure.
And
Mhm.
this matchup completely lived up to it. It was like an all out battle from the beginning. We get into a fifth set. It came down to literally the last 2 points. It was, I forget what the score was. It was 15-13 or 14-16 or something.
Mhm.
And it was just insane. The atmosphere in the Devaney Sports Center in Lincoln was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It ended up setting a regular season viewership record for across any network ever. We had over 600,000 people tune in. And I remember even just that day, I did an interview during the football game, which had never happened, about the volleyball match coming up. And like that's just something that's unheard of. Like they took time out of the football game. It was while play was going on to
Sure.
interview me about the volleyball match. And like that's when I knew that it was going to be a really big deal. And just to have the match also live up to that in, what was going to have Big Ten title implications, postseason implications, two teams that literally hate each other. They played for the 2021 national championship. It had been a huge rivalry. And it was Nebraska's first time beating Wisconsin in like I think it was 10 tries or 11 tries. So
Ah,
it was something that no one on Nebraska's team that had been in that program had ever done.
yeah.
And the build up kind of live up to the hype, which was it was so cool to be a part of a match just like that big.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You know, I'm really glad, Emily, that you led with Volleyball Day in Nebraska because that's something that, as I've been new to the sport, I've learned more about. Frankly, I wish I were tuned in at that moment, but
Yeah.
of course, hindsight is 2020. Let me ask you this because I've been thinking about this year, trying to crack the code, trying to figure out what the heck happened. Like, is that something in your estimation that another school somewhere else could do? Or is that only exclusively to them because of how they
No.
travel? I've seen it firsthand here this year.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say it's not exclusively to Nebraska, but to be honest, where Nebraska travels, the viewership or the attendance records follow. So to be
Mm,
honest, I don't know if there's another school right now that could do that. I would say the only other school might be Wisconsin that could potentially get that many people. They've
sure.
played at the Kohl Center for the past 2 years, as well as Fiserv Forum when they've been playing Marquette during
Right.
non-conference play, and they filled that up. It's about 17,000. They've set an attendance record for the last, I think, like 2 or 3 seasons in a row of having that record fall. I would say that's probably the only team that maybe could do it. Texas has a big following, but I think the market's just too saturated there. Um, no, I mean, to be honest, Nebraska fans are second to none. They are the most passionate, most rabid, most knowledgeable volleyball fan base in the entire country. They travel incredibly well. I mean, every single place that they go, it feels like this season they've set attendance records. They just set one at Oregon. They set one at Northwestern. They set one at Michigan. Like they just constantly are setting attendance records, not for their schools, because so many people want to watch Nebraska play. So I would say at this point in time, it's probably exclusive to Nebraska that they could put, 90,000 people in a stadium to watch volleyball.
Sure, 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 sure. Okay, that makes sense. I know you just mentioned Oregon at the top of that being the recent match. One of
Yeah.
my childhood friends is Daley McClellan, one of
Oh
their
yeah.
PSs over there. And yeah, I know I wasn't watching, but I heard about it and I was receiving the information as it was coming in. Like that thing is a red wave. I mean, it's just remarkable what
Well,
happened.
one of the cool things too, and I had Oregon 2 days after they set an attendance record there. And I was talking to their head coach, Matt Ulmer, and
Yeah.
he was so excited because he was like, yeah, obviously the stands looked like Christmas. There were so many, people in red there. But the cool part about it was kind of an opportunity. He said it was an opportunity for me to really push our fans to say, all the seats are GA. So they're like, it looked like there were more Nebraska people there because they knew that they had to get there early to get better seats. Our fans are not accustomed to that. They're not used to that many people going. So he was like, if you guys want the good seats and you want to watch our team, you got to get there early because this has now become, our team is now playing in a conference where you're constantly having top 10, top 5, top 25 teams come in. Obviously that drives attendance, but he thought it was just so cool to see that happen. He was like, regardless of how many fans were for us and how many were for Nebraska. Just to have that many fans pack in was so cool. Another thing on that too, like I was at Northwestern's match, I think it was about a week and a half ago, where Nebraska came and they set an attendance record with over 6,000 people in attendance. They sold it out for the first time in Northwestern history, which was close to my heart because I played there. Um, but I had a lot of fans being like, well, it's only because Nebraska's playing here. And like, I totally understand that because, yes, there were probably more Nebraska fans than Northwestern fans, but also like Nebraska's played there plenty of times before. There's been plenty of times where we've had the number one, number two, three, four, five teams in the country come play, and
Sure.
hasn't even been close to that. So, yes, record attendance falls when Nebraska comes places, and same at Penn State and Wisconsin when they're traveling, but also like there's just a general interest for the sport, and especially if it's a sport or the team that you follow, they don't have to be a fan of Nebraska, Wisconsin, Penn State to just want to come watch some good volleyball. And so I thought that was cool. Like, yes, obviously there was a ton of Nebraska fans at all these places, but it's more just general interest for the sport and people saying, okay, maybe I haven't been to a match before, but like this is going to be exciting.
Mm, yeah. I know we just got a couple more minutes before you're on the road again, uh, in the profession that truly never sleeps. But before we get out of here, I have to ask you, like, from where you sit, and I think that's a really interesting anecdote that this has been happening, but the attendance records are now following. Like,
Yeah.
why do you think that is? Like, where are we at with the respect and the desire to follow women's sports to where it's allowed to happen time and time again right now?
I think that, I mean, there are so many reasons why not only volleyball, but women's sports in general are getting such big recognition right now. I think, there's an increased recognition of achievements on a national stage to like obviously winning championships. It seems like there's a lot more parity, especially in volleyball. Kentucky won for their first time in the spring of 2021, and then Wisconsin won for the first time in the fall of 2021. And it's a sport where we're seeing, the bottom get better, the middle push the top, and we're seeing the teams at the top continually changing. It's not just Nebraska, it's not just Texas. Pitt's been number one for most of the year. So I think that parity plays into it. I also think there's just a deeper exposure for
Hmm.
TV. There's more matches on TV than ever before, so people are more inclined to watch. I know since 2015, the number of matches on Big Ten Network has tripled. The viewership for ESPN and Big Ten Network, who are primarily showing the most volleyball, is over 100% what it was a few years back. I mean, the exposure for the sport just getting enhanced coverage and having those number of matches skyrocket is huge, and promoting that as well. There's been so much promotion on social media for Big Ten Network. I mean, they started me as their digital host in 2021 to gain more exposure. ESPN does a ton more online about highlighting big plays, big matches coming up, things like that, and networks really amplifying those. And I think also doing a better job storytelling. Like we know a lot more about these athletes than we did a few years ago. I think part of that is like the Caitlin Clark effect. We
Sure.
have these star athletes that I think we're still finding a way to get that to translate to volleyball a little bit more, because I think it's easier in women's basketball to have these kind of stars come out because it's more of, I don't want to say like it's an individual sport, but to me, volleyball is the quintessential team sport. Like you have to have three touches on your side. If you have a star player, that's great, but they can't win you the match. Like there's
That's
plenty of times where they're not even touching the ball, nor can they. So I think it's different in that sense. But I just think the coverage has just grown exponentially because we care about these athletes, because we've had investment from networks and leagues and, the people at the top identifying that volleyball is important because, they can't turn away from the numbers now. Like the exposure is there, the viewership's there, attendance records are falling. And it's been so fun just to see in the last few years and to be a part of for me, because it's been something that I've lived for, 15 years of my life being in women's sports and constantly feeling like we have it inferior to men's sports. And it's been fun to see that, especially in volleyball, where women's volleyball is exponentially gets more coverage and viewership and is played more than men's volleyball. So it's a little bit unique in that space, but it's been really fun for me to be a part of something that's, growing so much and is consistently pushing the boundaries of what's possible and setting records, and to be at a point where the viewership and the attendance doesn't lie and you can't turn your head away from it anymore.
Hmm. Well, Emily, gosh, dang it. Thank you for coming on. And I know that's exactly kind of where we'll leave off, just to get you on your way. But I so appreciate you for doing this and for being willing to talk shop with me. I know I gained a great deal of insight and have the last few times we've connected. So thank you so much.
Of course, I'm always happy to come on. Thanks for having me. It was good to chat.
Absolutely. That's it for us on the Rec Room, folks. Thank you so much for continuing to tune in as we keep moving along.